Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to round 6 of my Anti-Chess World Championship 2020. Okay, never mind. We're continuing last match. I had drawn 5-5 against Ultimate Super Player after an amazing match played by him. And as I said, that match sort of inspired me to study more lines and like multiple lines instead of just a couple. And so this is my game. After that, I'm playing against a very well-known player in the anti-chess community, Kotov Syndrome, who is an anti-chess international master and just an amazing player who's been around the community for a very long time. I also wanted to touch on the fact that I was notified about how down here my title says AGM when at the time of this match I wasn't AGM. But after considering putting AIM down there, and changing the title up here for my opponent possibly. I think this works well though because, for example, if you see a match described by someone like Magnus Carlsen when he is very young, they still refer to him as a grandmaster, and so I'm just going to be putting the title of a player at the time of the creation of this video. But other than that, let's just get into it. So I'm playing Kotov Syndrome here. And for this match, Kotov is a very experienced and very well known for playing c4 in his games. And at the point of this game, I actually didn't have a really strong c4 defense. And so my thinking was, coming into this match, I was thinking, okay, if I can really punish him, because I feel very comfortable with the white pieces, if I can really punish him when I have the white pieces, then maybe I can turn it around on him. And so basically what I did as the black pieces is I just studied certain lines that he plays a lot as white in the c4 lines, and I tried to find the most draw-ish lines that I possibly could. And it is said that in anti-chess that drawing a game is harder than winning or losing. Like it's way harder to draw games, but I was willing to give it a shot. And so my thinking was, I'm gonna win the majority of games as white, like I did in my match against Ultimate Super Player. So I just have to really focus on winning, or in this case, drawing as many matches as I can with the black pieces. So anyways, game one, Kotov Syndrome, no surprise, opens with c4. And I play b5, and okay, c takes b5. After a6 and captures here, I capture with the rook. So just basically developing the queen side as fast as possible. Both of our king sides are pretty underdeveloped, and that's probably what the endgame is going to be composed of, is the same pieces. And generally, in both anti-chess and normal and standard chess, if you have the same pieces, it does begin to look extremely drawish, especially with opposite colored bishops and etc. But anyways, we have e3, so just starting to develop now. Rook takes a2, rook takes a2, and now we have double threat coming down here, so I play knight a6. Rook captures, bishop captures, and bishop captures. I play queen c8. Another possible move for this position is something like queen b8 or queen a8, but I prepare queen c8. After captures, knight to f6. Just when this captures, my knight is more developed now. I could recapture with the king, but in this case I capture with the knight just so now my pieces are developed. I can move my knight to either of these squares and I won't have any trouble here. I can open up the g pawn maybe eventually. So we have b3. Just moving some space for the bishop maybe, and also maybe providing a defense against e6 or e5 at some point. But I play g5, which does attack, maybe open up for my bishop, and we have, oh, kings can't move down there, but we have queen to h5. So just creating some threats here, and I play bishop to h6, so I want to keep my rook for the endgame, so no capture there. And after captures here, it sort of relieves the pressure that my bishop has been put in. It can't just easily become a safe sacrifice anywhere. Obviously, you don't want to sacrifice your pieces for no reason, but I can't do it if I have to at this point, so taking here does not really work that well. So queen takes f7, and after king takes f7, development of the knight to e2, and I play my bishop back, just getting it out of this harm's way. We have king d1, bringing the king into the game, and I decipher that e6 is in fact an okay move to play. And we have bishop a3 just giving up the bishop, and now white has some fairly nice pieces, but so do I, though the one thing I don't have going for me is my separated pawns, but I figure this is a very draw-ish position, I think. So if I keep my pawns where they are, then maybe I can settle for a draw. So king e7, and after king c2, I go knight to b6. Hopefully, I can trade off two more equal pieces, and then we get closer and closer to a draw, which is exactly what I need as for the black pieces. So okay, knight c4, and we trade, and I now play c6. I don't want to play necessarily something like c5, because after oh shoot, after c5, e5, maybe after maneuvering the knight, there could be some threats, like after I take here and the knight moves here, and in this case, black could have a nice couple series, sorry, white could have a nice couple series of captures, which would land my pawn somewhere on a square where I would have to promote to a piece, which I do not want to do. So anyway, c6 in this case, and we have e4 anyways, just grabbing more space in the center. King d7, just trying to, maybe I can move my king to this side and block off white from over here. We have king b2, so sort of racing over here, but I play king c7, king a2, king b7, so we're just shuffling our kings. King b2, I play king a6, just marching up a bit. And after king b3, king b7, and king b2, we both realize that neither of us will want to do anything except for move our kings. We like how our pieces are. So a draw was offered, and a draw was offered by me, and a draw was accepted by Kotov syndrome. So first game for the black pieces, I did manage to score a draw. And this is the most difficult thing for me, is now I've got to change both of these scores right here for the viewers. Yes. And there we have it, 0.5 to 0.5. But anyways, let's get into game two, where I now have the white pieces. And I open with e3, and Kotov responds with the wild boar defense, or attack, whatever you want to call it. And I prep this line, so after knight takes a6, I go down to queen h5. Two main moves are knight b4 and bishop to g7. But in this case, Kotov plays knight b4. I take on f7, and the critical move for black here is taking on a2. But as I had seen a couple of Kotov's previous games, often taking here, so this is why I wanted to prepare this line. King takes f7, and now I have a4, forcing this capture, and after I move this pawn, then it will force another capture. So knight takes c2 and e4. We now have knight takes a1 and b3, forcing the captures of more pieces. d3, getting it out of the knight's way. So takes on c1, and now e5, just setting up maybe several different options for me. Knight takes d3 and king to d2, just saying, okay, you're not going to take my king, and I'm also going to undefend my f2 pawn. We have knight takes e5 and king d3, now setting up for all of these captures in a row. So knight takes d3, knight a3, just getting ready. Maybe I try something like this, just so then it opens up the rook on this pawn. So knight takes f2, knight to b5. After taking on h1, I take on a7, the rook captures, and I just play knight e2. And then after rook to a4, rook takes on a4, I play knight d4, and after the capture, g4, and it was in this position that Kotov syndrome resigned the game. So that puts my score up to 1.5 in, once again, a game to 5.5, or best out of 10. So at the moment, I am winning the match. Moving on to game 3. I will flip the board so we see it from my perspective. Kotov switches it up here, and doesn't go for c4, and this really shocked me, but instead goes for e3. And okay, I go for b5, bishop takes b5, and I go for bishop a6 once again, Bosnian defense like in most of the other games, and this is more of a tactic saying, okay, I've studied this line a fair bit recently, so I feel comfortable with it, as well as my future opponents. I'm probably not going to play this defense again, but maybe if I play it now, they will think that I will play it. So anyways, bishop takes d7, knight takes d7, and we see c4. This is the Stockfish recommended move. Bishop takes c4, and queen to f3. Just I guess developing the queen and providing options for the queen. Bishop takes a2, rook takes, queen takes the rook on a8, and I recapture the queen, and Kotov recaptures with the rook. I take on g2, and Kotov captures on a7. Yeah, the only capture. I now take on g1, just possibly doing all this stuff. But we have rook takes on c7, so I obviously take the king now. We now have rook taking on e1, and I go for f5, attacking this pawn right here. So we have rook takes on d7, king takes on d7, and rook to h1. I now play f4, giving away this pawn, just so then I can provide some more space for myself. So after e5 takes, and instead of giving up the piece right here, this pawn is a little bit of a threat to me right now. I don't want to give white just this pawn because there's no way I can recapture it, and not a great way that I can set up for it. So I just give away my bishop, and now my king has a ton of space in the center of the board. Obviously this pawn can't move because of the bishop, and my knight and rook will be able to develop with ease. But anyways, we have b4 now, and I go h5, immediately grabbing space. Doesn't allow the movement of this pawn, sort of hindering white's development. But we have knight to c3. In this case, I played king to d5. I guess I just assumed that it was winning, but as you'll see in a second, after knight e7 and takes, I play g6, and after the capture here, there's not much that I can do. In this case, I play rook to f8, and after takes here, advancement of the pawn, rook g1 and h3. Kotov gives up the rook, and then this is pretty much impossible to see. But Kotov plays knight d7 here when I think knight e6 was the only winning move. I don't know. It has to do something with the promotions, or something like that. But yeah, it's just sort of you're probably not looking at one of these moves being significantly better. I can turn on the engine probably for a second. It might slow down the video, but in this case, knight e6 and knight g6 both win. After king promotion, more importantly, so then they can come to f4 and sort of make sure both of these pawns are captured. After capturing on h2, the knight can come here and then capture, but instead Kotov plays knight to d7. So that's why that move's a little bit stronger, or a lot stronger I should say, because now after knight d7 my king promotion is safe and I will only have to capture one of these two pawns. But anyways, we have f4. Oh, I did not capture, sorry, that is d4. That is, my apologies. F4, king takes on h2, and now I'm just looking to chase this pawn down the board, maybe cut over at some point to e3. But f5 and king to g3, so still providing both of these options for myself. Bishop b2, sort of getting out of the way of this, because before, if this pawn was moved, the bishop would still be controlling that square. So king h4, f6, just moving the pawn away, and I go for king h5 after f7, king to g5 right here. And in this case, I feel like this is a strong move by me, as the only place both the bishop and the knight can sacrifice are on f6, but since they both control their squares, there is nothing to be done there. So in this case, Kotov plays bishop to f6. Oh, sorry, that is my bad. Kotov plays bishop to g7, and after king to f6, Kotov syndrome, sorry, I'm messing this up. Kotov syndrome resigns the game. So that would change the score. I am now up 2.5 to 1/2. And so I was very happy to get a win with the white pieces. I was certainly not expecting to play e3, but of course I was certainly good with it. And moving on to game 4, I once again have the white pieces. Yeah. So I play e3, and this time c5 from Kotov syndrome. I go for bishop a6. This is all standard. Knight captures, b4, c captures on b4, and d3. We now see b3, And after capturing, we see the gopher variation in the Polish. The Polish is c5, I forgot to mention, but this is the gopher variation. So after knight e2, we have knight e6, and now d4. Just after these captures, my knight is easily developed, as well as my bishop. My king can move, my rook will be free, and so will this rook, and this knight is already developed. Meanwhile, black's pieces are all in the back rank. No pawns are moved. They're all sort of stuck. The only developing piece is the queen. But the only two moves in this position are g6 and g5. Generally, a queen race would work, but because I move my knight to e2, after this capture, I can immediately recapture, and this bishop will have to capture everything. But anyways, Kotov plays g6, queen takes d7, king takes d7, and knight d2, just developing my knight, and queen to a5. I play king d1, and we have queen captures on d2. Obviously, if you capture down here, it could get a little messy, because after a rook to b8 and take, I'm rather capturing a pawn that has to be recaptured with a bishop or a rook, or you're losing the king, and your bishop's going to be wide open here. But anyways, I capture on d2 with the king, and bishop to h6 is played. And in this position, if you... Oh, I moved the board again. If you want to find the winning move for white, go ahead. This is a really good sort of tactic puzzle, so go ahead. And now that you're back and you've solved the puzzle, you're not surprised to see the move a bishop to b2. And I did play this move in the game. The point being, after this capture, black will have to capture two undefended pieces. So I just had to find a way, or sorry, one extra undefended piece. So I just had to find a way to capture an undefended piece of black. And so I captured down here. After bishop captures on d2, I now go for knight f4. Captures, and I play rook h to d1. Now getting out of the way, after this capture, I will capture here. The king will be gone, and the bishop will have to recapture, opening up more possible lines. So capturing on h2, I capture, and obviously the bishop recaptures, and now it's all over. f4, oh, this bishop captures, g3, and the bishop captures once again. e5, or that's this square. And after the capture, we just go for b4, captures, and b5, obviously preparing for a4 on the next move. And it was in this position that Kotov's syndrome resigned the game. So I am now up 3.5 to 1/2. Let's just change that. Wonderful. And we're moving on to game 5, where I will flip the board. And Kotov opens with c4 once again, and we go for the exact same line. Rook captures, but this time we see queen a4 by Kotov. Rook captures, and now e3, like in the previous game, opening up for the bishop. And after these captures, I play knight a6 again. Rook captures, bishop captures, and queen c8. And after bishop takes c8, not this time going for this. I feel like it's okay this time, because there's no queen to sort of attack me. I just go for the nice and simple g6. And after bishop captures, king captures. And we see b3 from Kotov once again. And I go for the immediate bishop to h6, just trying to get rid of this bishop. Maybe I can push the e-pawn, develop my knight, and now my rook's in the game, and I'm all happy. So anyways, we have bishop to a3 by Kotov, and after this capture and this capture, I recapture with the knight, and Kotov recaptures with the f-pawn. Generally, I would recapture with the d-pawn, just keeping my pawns connected. That's generally easier to sacrifice them all at the same time, or if you get a promotion with spaced out pawns, it can be tough sometimes, and sometimes you'll be left. So I would generally capture there, but obviously in this case, Kotov captures with the f-pawn, and I go for c5, just sort of attacking over here, maybe providing more space for me in the future. But okay. Oh wait, that's b4. Kotov develops the knight, and I just play c4, giving up the pawn. Obviously, you don't have to give up pieces here. It could just become a nuisance in the future. So knight e2 and c4, and I give up the pawn. I now just play king c7 and king d1, and we begin moving our kings once again. King b7 to c2, king a6. But this time knight a3. Obviously, if Kotov can trade a knight for a king, that's certainly what you want to do. But I play king b7, just moving right back, and knights to c1, maneuvering the knight over here. And one question that I get a lot from people is, you can sacrifice this knight here, why aren't you doing it? And in this case, it doesn't really get me anywhere. If I sacrifice right here, there's no real good continuation. I could even give up my king, but then it's just all over for me. I can't move my rook anywhere this way. I just move my rook back and forth until finally white controls like all of this board, and I've got nothing to do. And as soon as I push my pawns, if Kotov just recaptures my pawns, then my rook has to move again. So giving up the knight is certainly not something I want to do. So I just continue moving my king, king c2, and knight to a2, maneuvering the knights together. This setup with two knights back to back can be very powerful considering all of the squares the knights control side by side. Rook to g8, I didn't really have a better move. F5 could be an option, but I didn't play it in this game, and this would just rather disrupt white's progress, and it would also maybe give me more options to move my rook to f8 in the future. But now rook to a1, so moving white's pieces over here, and rook to h8, and now king to b2, putting all of white's pieces together. We now have rook to e8. Oh, that's my move. Rook to e8, and d3, now advancing the pawns. We now have rook to h8. I just keep moving my pieces back and forth, and king c2, and I go back to e8. We now have king to b2 again, and rook to h8. I'm just hoping for a draw, as I had previously mentioned. But we now have knight to c3, and I just play king d7. I don't mind if the sacrifice happens here, and that's exactly what happens. Okay, so knight d5, knight takes, and c takes, and I go back king to c7. And now white has sort of an advantage. Pushing these pawns can be very helpful in the future. I'm eventually going to have to take them all, in which white has very nice space control on the queen side. So white now plays but white plays d6, and I feel like d6 was not necessary at this point in time. I'm not going to sacrifice my king, so pushing these pawns is probably the better idea. But d6, king takes d6, and king c3, bringing the king into the game. We now have king to d7. And keep in mind that rook to b1 was also a very strong move, because even after rook here and the capture, there's no way I can give away my king now while giving away all my pawns. And so it just leaves my pawns in an awkward position, very undeveloped, and just my king, whereas white has several pieces. But we have d4. And I go king e7, realizing after that last move that this move was possible. So I was just like, okay, now if you want to play that, then I can move my king to f8. But now d5, further pushing the pawn, and king to d. Wait, hold up. Oh yeah, king to d8, and knight c4, grabbing more space. We now have king to c8. And king to b7. Oh shoot, I keep messing up now. King c2 and king b7. I want to get rid of this rook, obviously, before, if I ever move my king up, then then this rook would come down and I would have to recapture. Okay, Kotov gives up the rook. Obviously, Kotov's only down to 16 seconds, and I only have 26 seconds, so we're both fairly low on time. Easier to calculate, and now king to b2. But after giving away this rook, white gives away a large space advantage, so now I can play king b7, and if the knight is given away, then I'm feeling good. So knight e3, knight a3, king a6, knight c2, king a5, just grabbing more space. King c3, and I go for a king back to a6. We now have king to d3, king b7, and knight back to a3, trying to keep as much space. And I now go for g5. I don't care if both of these pawns are given up. Now I can promote to something down here, and maybe I can take advantage. So we have h4 takes, g3, and takes, and knight to c2. I now play h5, grabbing more space with this pawn, and king to d2. We now have rook to g8. I'm just trying to get my rook gaining more space, and d6. We now have king to c8 right here, and d7, giving away the pawn. Now I recapture, but I'm feeling pretty good now because this is white's only pawn left, so I can definitely control this pawn very easily. And I have a king and rook to white's king and knight. So e4 and g2 getting ready to promote, e5, and I play f6, and after this I play h4, and we have king to e1, just bring the king close over here, h3, king d2, and h2, and after knight to a1 in the corner, I promote to bishop here, which is fairly strong, considering the king can move back, which is what Kotov does. But giving the king away, I sort of play this in hopes that Kotov would give the king away, but in that case, White would be left with extremely non-maneuverable pieces. So Kotov makes a smart decision, goes king to c2. We now have bishop to e3. I'm further. This is still safe because obviously you can't sacrifice the king and another piece. So I'm just trying to get rid of White's king. But we just have f7 in this case, and there's nothing I can do to give away all my pieces, even though there's a capture right here. But I go bishop d2 anyways. We have f takes g8 and promotion to king. I promote to king down here, and after the king takes and king to h2, we agreed to a draw. So that made me very happy. I was more than happy with a draw with the black pieces, especially at this point. Um, so, oh wait, I didn't mean to give him a full point for that. This would just be 1 point for Kotov. And now I'm at 4 points. So in this case, I only need one more win and a draw. So moving on to game 6, I have the white piece again. Okay, I'm just making sure we're in the right place. And I go for e3, and Kotov goes for e6, obviously, understanding that I probably prep both his c5 and his g5 lines, and this is the modern defense. Okay, bishop a6, knight takes a6, and b4. Bishop takes b4, and this is the stockfish defense, queen e2, bishop takes d2, and I take the knight down here. Only move is recapturing the pawn, and after knight takes on d2, we now have a5, just trying to pressure the bishop. I move back to f1, and now e5. I play h4, because now this gets rid of the king, and if nothing is done down here, then if the rook recaptures, I have knight h2, and that will win me the game. But we have knight h6, and after rook captures and g captures, I now play knight h3, just developing my knight, setting up for this. But we now have c5, further pushing on the queen side. This is what you want to do when your opponent has an undeveloped bishop on the c file. King to d2, just preparing to capture here. And we now have king to e7, bring the king into the game. And I now play knight to g5. H takes on g5 and f4. First capturing with the g-pawn and then with the e-pawn. And now I play knight to g3, and after the takes I can now play, oh, that's king e2, but I can now play king to e3. I can maybe set up for something like this, but c4, and I block with c3. Maybe I can run some threats like this in the future. My bishop is fairly blocked off, but all of black's pieces are on the back rank, so black wants to attack this, has to develop the pieces first. We now go to, now a4 by black. I was trying to play a4 for white, and a3, obviously I don't want this to become a problem, and we go for d5, and in this case I play king e2. Oh, that's king f2. I play king e2, and so this just allows this capture, but it also gets me out of the way from taking a bunch of pieces up here. So anyways, we have bishop to h3. After the capture, we have f5, grabbing more space. And it is to note that Kotov only has 11 seconds left, so this sort of attacks the bishop. But I just move my bishop out of the way to b2, and obviously after this capture and this capture, my bishop is still fine. But we have king to e6. Maybe something can be set up here. And I play rook to b1, getting ready because both rooks are defending this b8 square. So if I can move my bishop away, then I will be attacking that square twice, and it will be 1 for me. We have rook h to f8, maybe setting up a bunch of captures in a row. And I go back to a1, just saying, okay, now I'm attacking both these squares. So Kotov, being only at 8 seconds, obviously has to do what he can. So starts giving away all the pieces just for some time back. And after this, c3, capture, and rook b8, giving up the rook now. But now this is slightly more winning for me. However, I don't necessarily take advantage of this. We have a5, bishop captures, and h5. I now go for f7 and g2. The most important thing for me, however, is just that I don't draw this game. Sorry, that I don't lose this game. A draw is still fine as I'm up 4-1. If I draw this game, then I could play with then I could play the next game. And if I win the next game, then it's over. It's just if I lose this game, then we're down to 4-2. So I play bishop to c3. Just maneuvering my bishop better. I did have mate here at one point, but I did miss it. After king promotion, I now play rook d8. I'm just trying to get all my pieces to line up right here. f4, and I play king to d1, f3, and after f8 equals king, I'm also down to 9 seconds. Kotov's down to 15 seconds, and both of us just agree we don't want to get into a massive time scramble right here. So a draw is offered, and a draw was accepted. So this changes the score, obviously. I am now up, after the 6th game, I am up 4.5 to 1.5. There it is. 4.5 to 1.5. Moving on to game 7, where I once again have the black pieces. And we go for c4 again. c4, b5, and then a6 after these. Oh, whoops, I highlighted stuff. Rook to h6, and we have queen to a4 again after it takes e3, a2, and I go for knight a6 once again. Rook takes, bishop takes, queen c8, bishop takes, and g6 once again. We see the exact same things, b3, bishop h6, bishop a3. This is all the same, and I'm okay with this because obviously the last time this was played, I'm pretty sure it was a draw, which at this point I'm completely fine with. Then I'm up 5-2, and all I need is a draw, and we've had several draws already. So captures, knight captures, f takes, and c5 once again. We have c4. Oh wait, that's I keep messing that one up. Knight e2, c4 captures, and king to c7. King d1, king d1, king b7, king c2, bring the king into the game again. I play knight a6 again. Sorry, king a6 again. Knight c1, king b7, knight a3, and I just begin moving my rook now. Rook e8, knight a2, rook h8, and d3 a little bit earlier this time, and I go for g5 now, pushing my pawn a little bit earlier. We have rook to a1, bringing the rook over here once again, and king to c7. I don't want to play this because after g3 I sort of lose my advantage, and maybe white can set for a couple captures here. But we have h4 takes, and after, oh shoot, we have g4 being a little bit fancy, so then I can capture en passant. King d2, and I push f5 now. And okay, e4, captures, and g2. And Kotov gives up the rook on f1, but I can safely promote to king. This is not a problem. After this, there is nothing left for white to do. Kotov plays knight c3, and I just play h5. There's still nothing white can do. You can rather give up pieces right here, or you can give up this piece, and this piece, but then I am completely winning, and I will probably win that game. But we have knight d5, so after this capture, we have e takes on d5, and I go king d8. I'm just trying to get my king out of this way. D6, and now king to e8, d7, and after I capture, we have c5, king e7, c6, h4, c7, and I just move my rook up the board. We now have king c3. I push my pawn even further. After c8, king, and h2, both the players agreed to the 4th draw of the match, so I will change that quickly. I just want to make sure that I have okay, because I'm getting notified that I am having some lag issues. But anyways, I'm at 5. Kotov syndrome is at 2. I hope this lag didn't ruin the video, but I guess we'll find out eventually. And we're moving on to game 8, the final game. And I go for e3, and Kotov returns to g5, and I'm very comfortable with this. So bishop a6, knight takes on a6, and queen h5. Kotov once again goes for knight b4, king takes f7, but this time Kotov takes on c2, and I take the king on e8. We now knight captures on e3, but now I capture the queen, and now both these pawns are very weak, as well as this pawn is very weak. And the knight has to capture here on g2. I capture on c7, and now once again, give me one moment here. Okay, yeah, it was just skipping when I turned once I turned Stockfish on for a second, so hopefully that doesn't ruin anything else. But now knight takes on e1, and because there are no more captures, I capture on b7. Bishop captures, and I go for knight to a3. Bishop captures on h1, and knight to c2, just getting this knight out of the way, capturing, and then a4, forcing a capture on the rook. So knight takes a1, b3. It's also to of note, it took me this long to get it. I'm down to 16 seconds at this point. So knight takes b3. It would have been bad if I didn't get this, but at this point now d3. After taking on c1, now I have multiple captures set up. So I go a5, captures, a6, captures, and after knight h3, Kotov syndrome, resigned the game, which puts me at a total of 6 points, and gives me the match 6-2. Anyways, this was an amazing match played by Kotov Syndrome. Definitely a lot of draws. Although I did not, this match I did not lose a game. There were 4 draws, which I think was pretty crazy. You don't often see 4 draws in an 8-game match. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed playing this match against Kotov Syndrome. Always a great player, and a great guy. Always here for a good time. And so I really enjoyed my match against him. If you want to subscribe and share this with your friends who know or don't know anti-chess, that would be amazing. Otherwise, I'll put a link in the description to the study. I have to give a shout out to Kex once again for creating these studies. It's really helpful and amazing at the time and now. So thank you very much. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and have an excellent rest of your day.